Ready to get going. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday morning. We're ready for part 3 of this From Life Still Life painting project. No real updates on the website, no real updates on anything else that's going on at the moment. I do have, hopefully next week we'll have some bigger updates for you. So we can get straight into the demo today. And as I said last week, for this demo, I recorded yesterday. Actually, I recorded painting in the final details, and really this is a step that takes the longest. Right? It's going to be all the refining, all the working. Like I said last time, big to small, general to specific. It's just a matter of refining. It's going, building up the detail. If it gets too detailed, then breaking it back down to its foundation and building it back up. It's this back and forth. And a couple things that I wanted to mention before I start here today that I forgot to mention last week. One is that I hope you recognized last week that the painting wasn't in any good shape when we left it. It didn't look like a fantastic painting by any means. And I think we have this unrealistic expectation a lot of times when we're making art or I've seen this in students a lot, is that the painting is supposed to look good at every stage almost, or that if it starts looking bad, that somehow that's a reflection of our ability or the way that it's going to end up. And in reality, from what I've seen in painters and in my own practice, is that there are many ugly stages of a painting, and that's just the analogy of building a house. I think is an apt one in this case. You know, you can't look at the foundation of a house, the concrete slab, and really say, "Wow, this is a beautiful house," right? That's just a stage of the building, and you've got to be content with the fact that, and that's how it's supposed to look. It's not supposed to look good yet. Similarly with the painting, there will be stages when it just won't look good, but you're not at that stage of the painting when you're polishing and adding detail. So get used to this idea of creation, of painting being a process of building up and burning down, and not one of a very linear progress where it's always going to look good or it's going to consistently look better and better. Sometimes you're going to take 3 steps back and it's going to look worse, but it's, you know, you're building up a stronger foundation to then be able to continue to make it even better. So that was one thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the painting after I show you this sped up version of me painting finishing the details. So I'll jump right into that. Let's see. Let's start. Here's the painting as we left it last week, very generally blocked in. For each major element of the composition, pretty much just one highlight color, one shadow color. Trying to build the foundation of light logic and the illusion of space and form. The colors we're using this week are burnt sienna, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Burnt umber, ultramarine blue is my black mixture, cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, cad red medium, cad yellow light, which is also lemon yellow, cad yellow medium, and titanium white. This puddle off to the side here is phthalo blue. I decided that I didn't want to use that after all. To adjust the consistency of my paint to make it, if it's too thick, I can thin it out. I want to use matte medium. This is Nova Color matte medium. And I don't want to use, remember, I don't want to use too much water. And then things are going to get fast here. We've sped up about 20 times. So remember the principle that I mentioned last week is that we need to work general to specific. Working with large areas, large color relationships, with large value relationships, and then gradually getting smaller and smaller until the painting's ready for small marks, which are detail, right? So here I'm addressing the background, which is the largest area, kind of the biggest shape. I'm trying to address large folds, large gradations, and then gradually getting smaller and smaller. I'm using this as a time also to tighten up the drawing, to refine the shape of the dress a little bit. And then I'm also going to make the highlight on the ground in front of the dress lighter than it is in the photograph, just to draw more attention, to create more contrast in that area. With the lemon, I realized, as I did with the whole painting, in fact, that I didn't go nearly dark enough last week. And in fact, the conventional wisdom is that you need to work dark to light with opaque media like oil and acrylic paint. So generally, if you err, you want to err on the side of being too dark, which I definitely didn't do last week. So with everything that you see me do here in this painting, I really try to push things a lot darker than I did last week. You need that full spectrum of value to get things to feel really three-dimensional. You remember that the foreground lemon, I decided I want to have a lot darker than it is in the photograph, again, to make that background lemon stand out more and feel like more of a focal point. So refining the highlight and shadow and color in the petal in the foreground. With the dress, I made it a lot darker, and in fact in the photograph it is a lot darker in the shadow area. So notice in the dress that I'm pretty much repeating the step from last week. I'm blocking it in, just general, simple highlight and shadow color, and then gradually getting smaller and smaller. I don't go straight from that blocking in phase to the smallest folds. I go from big blocking in to medium-sized shaped folds, gradually working my way smaller and smaller until at the very last I'm addressing things like the small highlights and the little heart that's at the top of the chest. It's so important that you don't get to the smallest details or jump to those too soon, even though those are probably what you're most interested in painting. If I find that the detail, the mark I put down, isn't sitting quite right, if it feels like it's sitting on the surface of the canvas rather than feeling like it's part of the image, then I just paint over it. I get rid of it, and then I know that the problem is that I got to the detail too soon. So I paint over it and then build it back up, working more incrementally until I find the right balance, until it's ready for the level of detail that I want to get to. So it's this building up and breaking down. I build up until I get to the right level of detail that feels like the level of finish or resolution that I want. And if I go too far, or if it doesn't sit quite right, then I have to break it back down. And you just go back and forth between general and specific. So now I'm just going in, adding a little bit of surface texture on the lemon, roughing it up a little bit, refining the drawing a little bit, fixing shape. I decided I wanted to make that foreground lemon even darker. And then at the very end here, my head's covering up the painting, I apologize, but at the very end I'm trying to block in things like the little heart on the top of the chest of the dress and getting to small details and refining focal point, refining areas of emphasis, adding more contrast where I want there to be more emphasis, and then decreasing contrast where I want there to be less. So I wanted more contrast in the foreground in front of or right next to the dress, so I made that even lighter. And then at the very end, you'll notice my hands moving very short distances. I'm using a small brush because my painting is ready for that level of detail. It's important that I don't get there too fast. One of the ways that we talked last week of preventing this from happening is by using a big brush. So it kind of prevents you from addressing a level of detail that you're not ready for. So here it is. All right, so there are a couple things that I wanted to add to that that video, and why don't I show the painting here. This is the finished painting. After I was done with painting in the details yesterday, I added a layer of gloss medium. I think it's gloss medium varnish, but essentially any gloss medium would do the same thing. It was a Nova color gloss medium, but any brand would work the same. And I did this because when acrylic paint dries, it dries with kind of a plasticky matte finish. And that plasticky matte finish reflects the light in a way that that makes it so you don't get, I think it's just that surface, the way it reflects light, the blacks don't look really black, the darks don't look dark, lights don't look light. It kind of evens out value. When you add a glossy coat to it after you're done, it just makes everything a little bit more intense. The colors feel a little bit more saturated. The contrast between lights and darks is a little bit more intense. Because glossy surfaces, they either reflect all the light or none of the light. So you get this high contrast. Whereas when you get that kind of matte satin finish, it looks kind of plasticky. It looks like it diffuses the light. It kind of spreads it. The light scatters when it hits that surface, and it lightens up the dark places. So my choice is to typically when I'm done with an acrylic painting like this is to cover it with a varnish, a glossy medium of some kind, or a gloss gels as well, and that punches up the color and also the value contrast, makes it a little bit more vibrant. Also makes it look a little bit more like oil paint because of that glossy finish. And really, that's that is the end of this painting. I could noodle this more. There are problems I see with it still that I would address or could address. But really, for purposes of this demonstration, I felt like it was fairly successful. To review a little bit, let's look at the original image here. And you'll notice that this foreground lemon, if anything, it's getting more light than the background lemon. So remember, I made the decision that I wanted the focal point to be back here in the background, so I darkened this lemon up here in the foreground to use it as a framing, but also to suggest space. Having this lemon be larger makes the lemon in the background feel further away because of that size difference, but also because of the lighting. This lemon feels like it's getting hit by a different light source than this, which also implies some kind of spatial relationship. You remember also I mentioned that I lightened this area over here, made it lighter than it is here in the image, and that is to create more value contrast between these dark areas, the dark blues of the dress, and the ground that it sits on, to draw more attention to this area over there of the composition. So even though I started with this photo reference, and I stayed fairly true to it through the end, there are still a tremendous number of decisions that you have to make that can strengthen your composition. There are really subtle ways that you can emphasize and de-emphasize and clarify what this is trying to communicate, and what's important, what's of primary importance, then secondary importance, how you're going to get your viewer to look from here to there, and keep moving around the image. So the important thing here is to not feel like you're locked in, that you're just acting on default and just saying to yourself, well, I'm just copying what I see, is taking more control and responsibility for how your image communicates. So from the beginning, you got to have a pretty good idea of what the painting is about. If you're going to be able to communicate and decide how to fix things or how to enhance what you're communicating, you got to obviously know what you're communicating in the first place. So this was a still life painting, just to review, but not just any still life. In this painting, in the demonstration and for this project, I wanted there to be equal attention paid to technique or form, what the object actually is. It's paint, it's acrylic paint on canvas, and also to content, or what the painting means. When you make art, when you're going out, whether it's a still life or a landscape or whatever the content may be, a portrait, I want you to always be thinking about not just technique and materials and improving your skills in those areas, but also search for ways to make the content, or what this painting means, more relevant to you and more meaningful to you. And in this way, the hope is that you will simultaneously be developing both of those skills. Skills of technique and material, and also skills of communication, or taking something that has significance or meaning to you and communicating that to an audience. So thank you for tuning into this project. Thanks also to my my good friend, special guest, Rick, for once again joining me and keeping up the moral support. And next week we will begin a new project, and I'm going to get back into some mixed media stuff. So I haven't quite decided yet what that's going to be, but tune in, it'll be a good time. Also, make sure you check in on the website to this project, and if you create anything in response to this demonstration, if you make your own still life, make sure you upload an image. And if you don't know how to upload an image on the website, you can also email it to me and I'll post it on the gallery for that project. I'd love to be able to show your work to everybody else and start getting a conversation going around these projects. So thank you very much, and we'll see y'all next week. Yeah, we got some kind of error going there. There we go.